You, yes you, are a modern-day aristocrat. So before I tell you about why you are a modern-day aristocrat, I want to talk about a problem that has existed for a very long time. Maybe even as long as humans have been doing things. It basically goes like this. There are certain classes of human activities that don't really give you anything to eat. They don't, in the short term, make your life better. Things like this include inventions and art. If you're going to invent a new way of catching fish, well, in the meantime, you're not going to be catching fish. You're going to be sitting around playing with string and sticks. And of course, if you want to do artwork, well, for a while, you're not going to be catching fish or growing crops or doing anything like that. Instead, you're going to be mucking around with different pigments and smearing them over the wall. Now, if you are a caveman and you're trying to find a new way to fish, or you want to paint your cave wall, this is not the hugest problem in the world. You can probably save up enough food in order to spend your afternoon playing around with finger paint, or to try to invent a new way of catching fish. But especially as inventions and as art get more complex and more sophisticated, this ends up turning into a bigger and bigger problem. It's one thing to set aside an afternoon to finger paint and draw stick figures all over the wall of your cave, but what if you want to make a symphony? Or what if you want to cure cancer? Who's going to pay for that? Who's going to feed you? Who's going to house you during those weeks or months or years that it takes to create whatever it is that you're working on? So in short, the question is, how do we finance that class of activities? How are we going to make sure that they happen so that we can become more productive and have, arts and cultural achievements, when in the short run, while you're producing them, they're not very productive at all? One solution to this was found in the Renaissance and in the time periods immediately before and immediately after it, and it was patronage. So the system of patronage goes something like this. You're an inventor or an artist or something like that. You're interested in creating items of cultural importance that don't immediately put food on the table. What you will do is you will find a patron. You will find a wealthy individual or a wealthy family, or perhaps a community or city, or even a church like the Catholic Church, and what that patron will do is they will fund either the individual project you're working on, or they'll just fund any and all projects that you happen to be working on. Many of the incredible cultural and research achievements of the Renaissance were accomplished underneath some kind of system of patronage, for instance, the Sistine Chapel. Other individuals who operated under a system of patronage from roughly this time period include Shakespeare, Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, Beethoven, and Mozart. Effectively, what they did was they got the aristocracy to fund these pet projects. Now, this is a good system, although it does have one or two small problems. For instance, if your musical patron is the King of France, then you probably have to produce music that the King of France likes. If he doesn't like it, he'll probably stop funding you. Now, this is fine as long as the King of France has good taste in music, but if he has bad taste in music, well, that's not going to turn out so well, now is it? Additionally, only the King of France's musical tastes will be reflected. If other people have different musical tastes that are different, or maybe even better, those just aren't going to show up. Now, this problem existed not only in the prehistoric world, and not only in the Renaissance, but also in other time periods. For instance, we actually get the word patronage from the Roman word patronus. And in the Roman world, this is mostly like the early republic, you'd have a patronus and a client, and they would have kind of a similar relationship where the patronus would offer certain services and protections to the client, and the client in turn would owe certain services and loyalty to their patronus, to their patron. Of course, in the modern world, we also face this problem and have invented some pretty creative ways of solving that. One of the ways that we solve that is through commercial ventures. For instance, when you watch a movie, when they spend months producing a movie, that doesn't immediately put food on anyone's table. It doesn't even immediately make anyone's life better. But because of the large accumulations of capital, we can actually produce those movies. Another example is government funding. Funding things like cancer research is a little bit strange because you can sink huge amounts of money into it and never make any progress. Now, one perspective on that, a very shallow perspective, would say, well, it's not making any progress, it must not be very good, we should cut off the funding. And the problem is that in areas like the arts and cultural accomplishments and science and entrepreneurship, it's not immediately obvious whether or not it's going to pay off. This is why it requires some kind of initial investment in order to, be able to develop over time, even when the payoff doesn't come until significantly later in the future. So public grants and public funding are another way that we work around this challenge. In the realm of business and entrepreneurship, angel investors and really other investors play a similar patron-like role. These investors say, hey look, I think your idea will be successful. I don't know if it will be successful, but I think it will, and so I'm willing to sink some money into it. What's really cool about the modern world, though, is that we have invented a completely new way of dealing with this problem, this perennial problem of financing the arts and research, that combines some of the elements of that Renaissance system of patronage and also kind of puts it in a new 20th century sort of twist. I'm talking, of course, about platforms like Patreon or Subscribestar. All these different platforms that let you fund your favorite creators, whether they're on YouTube or Instagram or any other platform. What's so crazy and interesting to me about this is that it's virtually the same as the Renaissance system, except for instead of a few wealthy individuals or families or churches or cities providing the funding, all that funding is crowdsourced and dispersed among thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of supporters. The really cool advantage that this modern system has over the Renaissance system, though, is that whereas in the Renaissance only a few wealthy individuals, families, cities, churches, and other organizations could become patrons, now almost any individual at almost any income level and almost any social strata can become a patron. In other words, when you support your favorite creators in that way, you're basically playing the same role that incredibly wealthy and prestigious Roman families used to play in the ancient world, or what incredibly wealthy Italian families like the Medici family did in the Renaissance. It's democratized patronage. And that is why you, yes you, are a modern day aristocrat. In case you weren't aware, Other Joseph and I just launched a website for Good and Basic. I'm linking to the announcement video up here that also has the website tour. You can find it at goodandbasic.com. I'm also including a link in the description below. Although we don't use Patreon, we do use a platform on that website called DonorBox that allows one-time or recurring donations. So if you feel so inclined, we invite you to exercise your newfound aristocratic privilege and become our patrons. Thanks for your support. We'll see you next time.